welcome to a special session of Expressions, E-Expressions with the New Indian Express. I have with me a lovely panel, the very venerable Naresh Saxena, who's done so much to craft the Forest Rights Act when he was with the NEC. Biswajit Dhar, who's from JNU, he'll give us the sustainable development and the biodiversity aspect. Professor S.P. Roy of the IBRAD, who's really the spark behind this panel coming together, and Mr. Chawla, who's the editorial director of the New Indian Express. Welcome, gentlemen. And today we are going to discuss the Forest Rights Act and the sustainable development, and is it possible through this? So obviously I have to start with Mr. Saxena because he's the chief architect. And I want to ask him, what really was the reason behind it? Why did they feel compelled to craft this legislation? And how does he see its challenges, successes so far?
As you know, Adivasis or tribals are the poorest people in India. In fact, even in states like Maharashtra, which is one of the richest states, scheduled tribes of them, more than 50%, 60%, more than 60% are poor. The reason is that there has been historical injustice to Adivasis. They were occupying and using forest lands, but during the colonial period, their rights were not recorded. And because of that, they were declared as encroachers. Now, efforts were made 3 times to correct this injustice. In fact, I was Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Environment and Forests, and we wrote the new forest policy, which said that tribals will have the first charge on forests, and forests will not be used for generating revenue. They would be used for meeting the livelihood needs of the tribals. Unfortunately, this policy, which was passed in 1988, was not implemented. It remained only a paper policy. And then in 1996, when I was Secretary of Rural Development, we started, got a new law passed only for Scheduled 5 areas. Scheduled 5 areas are in central India. Not all districts are Scheduled 5, but some districts are Scheduled 5 areas, where we said that the panchayats and the gram sabhas will have the power and they will own minor forest plots. Again, this law was not implemented. Looking at the non-implementation of the policy and the limited law that we had called PESA, as a member of the NSC, we decided to have a new law passed, where we wanted to give powers to the gram sabha. That gram sabha should decide who are the people who are occupying forest lands for generations, but their rights have not been recorded. We also wanted to say that because they are collecting minor forest products, they are also helping in its management and its protection. So therefore, community rights should be given to them so that they can really manage forest lands. Unfortunately, when we had a very good Rajya Sabha member, Mr. I'm forgetting his name, he was from Orissa. Later he became the minister. He was chairing the committee and he got this law passed by the Rajya Sabha. Unfortunately, when it went to the cabinet, they made two changes which totally diluted the law. One was that Gram Sabha will only recommend, but actual powers were given to a committee headed by the collector. Collector will decide who is to get individual rights, who is to get community rights. And the other important change that cabinet introduced was that this law will not be in derogation of previous laws, which means that whatever is said in the Indian Forest Act, Colonial Forest Act, will also be applicable. With the result that in the field level, you find that there have been many omissions and this law has not been fully implemented. So far, out of 70 million hectares of forest lands that we have, only about 1.6 million hectares has been distributed to Adivasis for occupation and for their cultivation, and about 3 million hectares has been given under community rights. But there are many, unfortunately, the Ministry of Tribal Affairs does not monitor these programs very well. So we do not know. For instance, Gujarat says that 30% of forest lands has been settled with community rights. It is quite likely that they have not given them the right to manage or to protect forest rights. They have only given rights to use forest lands. As you know, even in the past, the use rights were already given to the people.
Right.
They were given during the colonial period.
Right.
But those rights have not been, they have been recorded. So there are all kinds of problems both with individual forest rights and community forest rights, because of which the implementation of the act has been very poor. The state governments are not fully sort of in tune. They do not know, and the Government of India Tribal Affairs Ministry is also weak ministry. They do not monitor.
So, so if I may ask quickly, why did the cabinet dilute these two important provisions? Which in a sense
because of the pressure from the Ministry of Environment and Forests.
Right.
They said that if you give powers to Gram Sabha, then the entire forest will be destroyed, and they will capture, they will use it for, they will cut down all the trees, etc., etc. So give this power to the collector.
Right.
That's one change. And they said that, look, Indian Forest Act should also, it has many good provisions, and therefore it should also be applicable. So therefore these are the two provisions which have diluted
right.
the Indian.
Now the Indian Forest Act and this Forest Rights Act must be quite a diversion at many points, right? So who resolves the issue, when there's a conflict?
Well, in fact, the conflict has to be resolved by the cabinet.
Right.
If there is a conflict between the Tribal Affairs Ministry and the Ministry of Environment and Forest, they should go to the cabinet. For instance, I'm chairing a committee these days on this issue. And our viewpoint is that the Forest Rights Act gives powers to Gram Sabha to manage and to protect forest lands. Section 5 very clearly says. But the Ministry of Environment and Forest says that this power is given only for that small area under Section 3(1)(I), where specific powers to manage have been given.
Right.
So we have 70 million hectares of forest lands. 7 million hectares have been covered under this. But out of those 6 or 7 million hectares, maybe hardly 1 million hectares is covered under Section 3(1)(I). So this dispute whether the Gram Sabha is empowered for the entire forest area or limited forest area has to be resolved by the cabinet. But Ministry of Tribal Affairs feels very weak, and they hesitate in taking it to the cabinet. So they said, okay, I'm appointing a committee under your chairmanship. You suggest this, and then we will take a report to the cabinet.
Right, right. Professor Dhar, Biswajit Dhar, may I come to you and ask you really on ground, have you seen any radical difference after the implementation of the Forest Rights Act?
Yeah, see, we have, Mr. Saxena talked about, the jurisdictional issues between two ministries, the tribal affairs and the environment and forests, on what rights the tribals and the local communities have on the land and the resources they have been using, traditionally. Now, I'll add another dimension to this, because this from the Ministry of Environment and Forest, there is another act being implemented, which is the Biodiversity Act. And the Biodiversity Act, it talks about conserving and sustainably using all the biological resources in this country. So there is a huge overlap between what is happening in the Forest Rights Act and the Biodiversity Act. And the Biodiversity Act talks about just not the resources, but also the associated knowledge along with the available with the resources. And it talks about, again, empowering the local communities and, sort of gives the powers to the local communities to manage the resources and have certain amount of control over the use of these resources. So the National Biodiversity, there is a National Biodiversity Authority which manages this Biodiversity Act, and this act is unique because it's a kind of a bottom-up. It's a bottom-up approach, because at the local level there are these biodiversity management committees, and the biodiversity management committees have there are statutory powers, and they again sort of lie alongside the Panchayati Raj institutions. Yeah. So the biodiversity management committees, which is supposed to be set up at every local level, but that is not very well defined, whether it's a village or the block or whatever, but it's supposed to be set up at a local level. Now, these biodiversity management committees are supposed to actually first take stock of all the resources that are available in that region, in their jurisdiction, and also the local knowledge which is there. Yeah. But what has happened is that until recently, biodiversity management committees were not established. Yeah. And after Supreme Court actually poked them, then in most states the biodiversity management committees have been established. But as Mr. Saxena is talking about, he's seeing Environment Ministry as a stronger ministry as compared to tribal affairs. But when we were when I was in the National Biodiversity Authority, I found that there was the Biotechnology Ministry, which was actually stronger than the Environment Ministry, right. Because that's where the commercial users of bioresources actually belong. So they were representing them, and also now the Ayush Ministry, where all these big Ayurvedic companies are there. So these two ministries are now actually calling the shots as far as the biodiversity management of this country is concerned. Right. So there is a huge effort being made to dilute the Biodiversity Act. In fact, there was recently an exercise to redefine several provisions of the Act. In some places, I think the Act has also been sort of rewritten, but all in the name of facilitating use of bioresources, ignoring the interest of the local communities, because the buzzword today is ease of doing business. So when you talk about ease of doing business, then environment goes out of the window. Environment is no one's baby. So you're only looking at that aspect. So here we have a very strange situation. So you can actually, from what you heard from both Mr. Saxena and there is no system in place. Of course, technically, yes, the cabinet is supposed.
So I think I got the gist of Professor Dhar's argument. May I bring in Professor Roy here? So we clearly have a plethora of legal instruments in place. The problem really now becomes that on the ground there must be tremendous confusion. Do you follow the Forest Rights Act? Do you follow the Indian Forest Act? Do you follow the Biodiversity Act? What to do when commercial exploitation? I think it's a fantastic point that you made. So on the ground, really, Professor Roy, what exactly is happening? There seems to be a lot of legal confusion.
Yeah. Thank you, Kaveree. Before I start, I will request the story which I like to repeat. Right. During our childhood school days, that 6 blinds were asked to describe an elephant. And how each one describes about the shape and size of the elephant. This happens with the tribal development also. When you ask for development, the tribal ministry will raise some issue. The environment ministry will have their own perspective.
Right.
The panchayat people, they will ponder on the Gram Sabha. the technology ministry will talk of the technology. The agriculture and the water resource, they will beat their own drum. What is missing over here? That there is a need for consolidated effort to view forest and the tribe as integrated, interdependent body. I will say tribal and the forest are integrated dependent body. They are the natural ecosystem. Even the tribals are also the part of the ecosystem. So I'm very happy to share here today that what Dr. Saxena has mentioned, that earlier forest department and tribal, they were not coming an agreement. Sometime back in the month of September and in the month of October also, Dr. Saxena must be knowing that both the minister discussed together, both the secretary discussed together and agreed that this time we have to implement, and it is taking too much of time. So I would like to refer here, as Kaveree, you mentioned what's the ground reality. I respect Forest Right Act. It has to be implemented in the letter in spirit. It has to be. But the operational plan is not very clear. Each one is beating their own drum. And also, if everyone beats their own musical instrument, there's no orchestra, there's no harmony. It is becoming noise. So for harmony, orchestration is required. So I will mention here, what did we learn? Some places, FRA have been implemented very well, like Odisha, some part of Chhattisgarh, some part of Karnataka, in Maharashtra also, some part. So we have to learn lesson. Wherever it has been successful, what are the factors for success? This is very important. Not that everyone it has failed. Some have done outstanding work. Some places there's a conflict. There are also places we have a mixed learning. That means it's growing and dwindling, growing and dwindling. So I would like to share here that the lessons which we learn from the ground, that as Dr. Saxena has mentioned, Gram Sabha has been given authority. Here the Gram Sabha has given authority. If you go through the act, Gram Sabha has given authority to identify the beneficiary, not decision maker. And instead of right, I mention here, it is more number of responsibility. And the Gram Sabha has given a list of responsibility which is not possible by any Gram Sabha to implement the act the way it has been mentioned. So sustainable use, harvesting. And Dr. Dhar mentioned for sustainable use, in FRA Right Act also it is mentioned that we have to follow the Biological Diversity Act 41.1 about the sustainable use. There is such a technical thing, limit of harvesting, dwindling, rare species, land race, and then also indigenous knowledge, IPR. It is made such a detail that Gram Sabha, why Gram Sabha? Many experts cannot understand, comprehend also. So the first difficult point is that after learning from the ground reality, wherever it's been successful, then how they have been successful in Gram Sabha, some places, because there has been facilitation by some NGO or some expert or even the forest department for building capacity of the Gram Sabha. So this is the requirement, preparedness. Second part of that, once the capacity is made, the Gram Sabha, in the act it is mentioned that one Gram Sabha, while managing the plant, they will be responsible for managing the water regime of the adjoining area. Look at that. I can manage my Gram Sabha. So how my Gram Sabha can be adjoining area? That means somebody of number of Gram Sabha should be able to see the adjoining area, because I will manage my own. The third point is that these are the difficulties, challenges. The first point, lack of competency.
Yeah.
Second point, too much expectation, technical expectation. The third point, that adjoining Gram Sabha, there has been some work. Fourth point, it is mentioned the Gram Sabha will form their own committee to seek expertise. Now, where are you going to get expertise in the village of the knowledge of ecosystem, water regime, micro planning, sustainable use? These are the technical things referred in the Act. So in the name of rights, I tell, in the name of rights, it is too many of responsibility. That is the problem. And it has launched without preparedness. So the preparedness is missing. And the last point of the governance. The governance system of human society is such, anywhere, that unless there is a structure, accountability, monitoring, and measure of the outcome, no governance system will function. Even in your organization, if the accountability is not marked, if the monitoring mechanism is not marked, if the action and reward is not marked, even our own governance system does not function. This is the minimum requirement of the governing system. In the Gram Sabha, I can mention such governance system is not spelled out. It's a labyrinth. It's an amorphous body and driven by the political lobby. So the poor tribals, they are carried away by the Act, and it is such a challenging, it is not to be implemented so smoothly. So preparedness, governance, and accountability. These things has to be there on the ground.
Right. Mr. Saxena, may I come to you with these points that Professor Roy is raising? Surely all these must have been considered when the Act was formulated.
Right.
And of course, we've seen the Panchayati Raj system in effect for many years now. And it's been quite successful. It has produced new leaders. It has, resolved a lot of issues. So why is the Gram Sabha, which has been in existence now for many years, not been able to grasp the legalities or the technicalities of this Act?
Well, in
Prabhu, just I'll interrupt here. Both
Sure.
Sorry, my apologies for you, because I'm getting a little confused on this. It's a very technical subject, because subject is sustainable development, tribal and whatnot. And it connects with tribal forests and whatnot. I want to understand from Mr. Saxena and everybody else, because definition of forest is still confused. So when you talk about forest, when you're talking about sustainable development, the tribals will be bound by the same Forest Act that they can't be able to fell their own trees inside the area and take a permission from whom? Sustainable development of a tribal land. Because why discrimination between tribal forests and non-tribal forests? There has to be some kind of some justification. I'm the journalist, I'm totally illiterate in this area. Because tribal is a sociological boundary or an economic unit like others. Your forest is a unit which is applicable whether it is tribal land or whether it is non-tribal land. Another problem is arising that if I grow tree in my farmhouse and 1 week later it declared the forest because it's 100 trees more than per acre. That way all the 100 in Bangalore should be declared a forest. So I don't know, because I can't add new trees. I can't cut my trees if they're excessive. They're going over my roof. I can cut them. They can demolish my building, which is I planted because I wanted trees to be around. So my question to both of you is, when you say sustainable development means the total development of the tribal area. I'm assuming the tribal forest is different than the forest owned by non-tribals. There are two different laws applicable to them. The sustainable level, can they be able to open a hospital there? Will they be able to open a college there in that area or school for which the land will be required Also, the land trees have to be cut. So I don't know. Supreme Court judgment in Balabaram case says if there is grass in your land, that is also a forest.
No, let me clarify some of these points. First of all, Forest Rights Act gives powers both to tribals and non-tribals. If they are forest dwellers, there is not much distinction. They also have a right to manage or to be given land which was already under the occupation. See, let's not put the entire blame on the forest department. There are many things which can easily be done by the district authorities. For instance, when we have regularized occupation of, say, about 7 million tribal families on forest lands, why don't we try to ensure that its productivity improves by linking it with NREGA? Why don't we ensure that their records, their right is recorded in the land records so that uncertainty is not there? Why don't we also see that the total production of minor forest products increases? After all, even if you give right to management to Gram Sabha or to local communities, unless the entire production of minor forest product increases, it will not help them. And very rightly, as has been pointed out, that biodiversity and livelihoods are interconnected. For instance, earlier, up to about 1990, the general silvicultural practice used to be that you plant the same species of the same age in a given place so that its harvesting becomes easy. So you destroy natural forest, plant teak, so that teak will be then harvested and it will increase revenues. But this has been given up theoretically, because what happens is once you clear fell tree, such trees, there would be barren land and it will be occupied. So therefore, the new silvicultural practice says many species of many ages, so that there is no soil erosion. There are species which give minor forest products. Unfortunately, we have not emphasized this. We have also not, our focus should be on increasing production of minor forest products, on improving the access to these minor forest products, and then to see that these are marketed very well. As you know, farmers have been, there is minimum support price. There is minimum support price for some products which are gathered by the tribals, but the budget is very limited, and whatever budget is given, it's not being spent. So therefore, unless we give a good price to tribal women for the products that they gather, they are exploited by the contractors and middlemen, and they hardly get anything. Plus, of course, there are many minor forest products like bamboo, which has not been included in the category of minor forest products in some states. And some states have monopolized rights over minor forest products. They say, no, tendu cannot be collected by people. It cannot be marketed by them. It has to be marketed only by the government. I recall some years back, I went to Odisha, where women had been prosecuted for keeping brooms in their house. Because at that point of time, the law was that you can collect brooms, but you must immediately sell it to the government contractor. Processing has not been, the right to process has not been given. The right to storage has not been given. It is still true of many commodities. So therefore, we need to really look at the state level. And unfortunately, the Ministry of Tribal Affairs should monitor all this, should have evaluation reports which will bring out the truth. Only then we will be able to improve the incomes and livelihoods of the tribal people.
Mr. Saxena, the point that Professor Dhar was also making about, ministries like Ayush, which have now entered the fray. You were talking about forest produce. So how do these then fit into the current environment?
Well, in fact, as you very rightly said, that biodiversity or medicinal herbs, etc., are collected, and there's a good market for that.
Yeah.
But there has to be emphasis on improving its production. Not only that, the access has to be improved. There are still many minor forest products like medicinal herbs or others, where you need to, if you're a tribal and if you are transporting it, you need a transit permit.
Right.
You know, even when it comes to a shrub like prosopis, which is widely growing all over Western India, in order to convert prosopis into charcoal, you require a transit permit, you require another permit to convert that into charcoal, you require a third permit to transport and sell charcoal. You know, we have given up control over large scale industries, but these cottage industries are under a large number of control about which our press or our NGOs are not aware.
Right.
Even in Tamil Nadu, you can't convert prosopis into charcoal.
That's it, yes.
So then how can local communities become self-sufficient or, you know, become
Competent.
production
So
houses?
local communities need to be, it's not enough to say that you are authorized.
Right.
If you are not giving them funds, if you're not changing these rules, if you're not building their capacity, if you're not telling them that please do not fear forest department.
Right.
There are many Gram Sabhas today are unwilling to apply for community forest lands because they feel that forest department will punish us. So therefore, it is the job of the collector, and collectors need to be, you know, trained in this, and they have to be made responsible, and there has to be proper, reporting by them that how much was the production of, say, whether it is sal seeds or sal leaves, is it increasing, not increasing? Is mahua produce increasing or not increasing? So that is what we need to see. And also then we have to minimum support price. No one monitors minimum support price for forest products.
Right.
Hardly some 300, 400 crores is earmarked as opposed to 2 lakh crores for agriculture.
Yeah.
So 400 crores, even that is not being spent.
Right. Right. Professor Dhar, may I come to you quickly and ask about these strange anomalies, you know? And it seems a very colonial mindset, isn't it? This fear of the forest official. I presume it's left over from the British Raj because they obviously wanted, you know, to use opium or, you know, all the products that they exported. So what can be done to resolve this? Do we not have enough NGOs, civil society activists who can actually become a bridge between the Gram Sabha and the local communities?
So no, I think the real problem is that, you know, you have this the Forest Act, which Mr. Saxena was saying that, you know, it will actually run concurrently with the Tribals Rights Act, and the foresters will never give up their rights, and you know, so they feel that they have a complete control over forests, and like the British Raj did, you know, with the same mindset, they actually control the forests and treat the tribals and whoever, you know, sort of in and around the forest in the same manner. So I know, and in my interaction in the Environment Ministry, you know, since many of the people who used to be looking after those issues relating to biodiversity were also forest officials. You know, one could see the kind of, you know, the mindset, you know, because here you know, there is a contradiction there itself, because the Biodiversity Act is talking about empowering the local communities.
Exactly.
And here comes the officers who are coming with the mindset of a forester, who are reluctant to actually devolve powers, even when they are supposed to implement that act. Yeah. So there is this reluctance. So unless this mindset, you know, I think that in my view and my experience tells me that the biggest stumbling block is actually the Forest Act, and also, you know, this whole foresters, you know, the whole hierarchy that has been created, and you have this the Forest Service people who go with that mindset. Yeah. So I think they need to be trained, and they have to be told that, look, you are actually working, you are supposed to be working for the local communities, and you know, your job is to actually ensure that the local communities prosper, and then the resources are used in a sustainable manner. Yeah, because the rate at which biodiversity is depleting in this in the world, and also in India. In India, we hardly take stock of the rate at which biodiversity is depleting. It's going to be a very serious problem going forward. So the problem, as I see it, is the following: that we have a number of acts which are talking about benefiting or empowering or sort of uh, um, improving the lot of the local communities. But all these acts are actually running at cross purposes. So you have the Panchayati Raj institutions which are at one level. If the Biodiversity Act which overlaps, and then they have a member of the Panchayati Raj from the panchayats who's a member of the biodiversity management committees. Then you have the forest dwellers, their rights coming in. So all these acts are there, but there is no coherent system in place which is aimed at benefiting the people for whom these acts are made. Yeah. But these local communities, tribals, non-tribals, there's a definitional problem. Who's a tribal? Who's a non-tribal? All those issues are there. Where do you draw the line? Who is a local community? Because the local community also includes tribals. Yeah. Right. So the problem is that no one is trying to work through this, the different laws which are there, and trying to bring it in harmony, all these laws in harmony, so that the basic purpose of these laws which are benefiting the local communities, that is served. Yeah, I don't think, so what has happened is the different ministries have these acts, they actually they own this act. And the classic problem in this country where everyone works in silos, all these ministries work in silos. So tribal affairs, will look at their act. Environment will look at their act. Within environment, there are two acts which are running.
I'll intervene again because my problem which I raised, because I'm reading about it. Yes. We're not able to have a law which defines forest. Supreme Court has given a definition. Mr. Saxena talking about it, right. The revenue records. I want to ask Mr. Saxena, if the revenue record says it's not a forest, can NGT declare it a forest of a private land?
In fact,
for 40, 50 years, I have given examples of various states. I have done the stories also. Various states have said, okay, this particular area doesn't fall in forest for the last 60 years. But NGT has stated there, no, it is a forest. Because some NGO claim that it is a forest. Because some trees are there. So how do you come out of this? Because like you might have heard Gair Mumkin Pahad. You must have heard this definition when you were handling Mr. Saxena. Gair Mumkin Pahad says that nothing can be grown in it. It's a definition given by foreigners when they were here. That nothing can be grown. If I want to grow on that, Gair Mumkin Pahad, make it green, I'm not allowed. What is this? This is forest because I declare forest. Then Gair Mumkin Pahad means it can't be grown. There anybody who puts a tree, it should be challan and arrested under the Criminal Act. So these kind of definitions with NGO-dominated environment policy, tribal is a good thing. Tribal should be restored the land. But the question was come to the consensus first. Last 4 years, Ministry of Environment has written to various states asking that, okay, give your definition of forest. That is where 5% coverage of the land falls. If the tree shadow falls on 5%, it is that kind of discussion is going on. 10%, 5%, 3%. Well, there will be so many problems here because forest has become a business here. Business in terms of not serving the people with Mr. Saxena is talking about. All of you are concerned about it. Tribal should be given the right to manage their own land. So should be others as well. But then it can be happen only when the private land, which are not forest in revenue record, whether with the tribals or not, should be allowed to use it under the guidelines of the green environment, whatever is there. But Mr. Saxena, you are in the service for 30, 40 years. I don't know why this forest definition of a forest is still not settled in an independent India.
Well, in fact, my views are slightly different on this issue. You are right in saying that the Indian Forest Act has a very roundabout or tautological definition of forest. Forests, according to Indian Forest Act, forests are that area which has been registered as forest.
Correct.
So therefore, in the revenue record, if you record barren land as forest, it is forest. If you are leaving out horticulture trees owned by a private person as not as forest, it is not forest. So therefore, forests are not trees. Forest is that land which has been recorded as forest. It could be barren land, it could be protected land, it could be wildlife habitat, it could be reserved forest, and so on and so forth. I don't have any problem with this issue. You see, we need to really make a distinction. As a policy maker, one needs to make a distinction between what is desirable and what is feasible. It may be desirable that forest department should be given up, should be finished, it should be abrogated. You should just sort of say, okay, goodbye. It is not going to happen. We have to live with the reality. But what is feasible is that increase production of minor forest products, improve their access, reduce those laws and controls which come in the way of women marketing for forest products in the market, have minimum support price, and monitor this. On this, I'm sure the Ministry of Environment and Forest and Tribal Affairs will have no differences. So whatever is feasible, if we emphasize on those areas, unfortunately, our civil society and NGOs, they are focused more on management. Management should be by Gram Sabha, not by Forest Department. Okay, very desirable, not going to happen. Forest Department will not give up its management. But if they also focus attention on overall production, whether production of current is improving or not, whether production of Beda is improving or not, whether it is leading to higher incomes, that is not being monitored. So it is the fact, and this is, as I said, when you have more minor forest product, your forest becomes, it is not timber based, it becomes crown based. Then you have to have many species in the same area. It will also lead to biodiversity, it will lead to water conservation, it will reduce soil erosion, plus it will also improve the travelers' incomes, forest dwellers' incomes. So there are these win-win situations, but we have not emphasized. Our civil society, our press, our ministries, our state governments, no one talks about this, no one monitors how much Karanji is being produced, how much Mahua is being produced. That is the whole issue.
Right. Since we're coming to the end of the discussion, may I request Professor Dhar and then Professor Roy to give, as Mr. Saxena has given, some idea as to how we can resolve a very complex situation on the ground. There must be some solution. Perhaps we could highlight those. Professor Dhar.
In my view, I think we should not actually miss the wood for the trees. In the sense that all these acts, as I mentioned, have a very clear objective of benefiting the local communities. And we do recognize that they are the poorest of the poor, and something needs to be done to improve their lot. Like Mr. Saxena was talking about, we need to record what kind of resources are available. In the same breath, I think it is important that these conservation and sustainable use are, the local communities know best how to do that. Yeah, and so they need to be empowered, and their needs have to be met to the fullest extent, so that they do the job that they have been empowered to do under the laws. All these the local level organizations, like I mentioned, biodiversity management committees, these are statutory committees, and they have to be given adequate resources, and have to be given the incentives for them to go ahead. And in today's world, nothing works without incentives. Yeah. So you can't actually just assume that they're going to be doing it for the love of it. Yeah, that doesn't work. So you need to actually keep these local communities engaged in the work of looking after the bioresources and all the local knowledge. The extent to which we're losing local knowledge, the traditional knowledge, is enormous. Now, if you don't incentivize the VEDs, if you don't incentivize those who have been actually using the local knowledge, yeah, and if you go and talk to any VED anywhere in this country, they'll say, "नहीं, मेरा बेटा बेटी जो है ना, वो उनको तो हमने सरकारी नौकरी में डालना है, हमारे इसमें कोई पैसा नहीं है." So I think this is the first and the foremost thing that has to be done. Look after their interests, and for that, all the ministries should break their silos and come together, because there has to be a common mission. So whether they are actually living on or off forest land, or they are living slightly away from tribal land, they're all local communities. They're all among the poorest of this country. And with that objective, if you take the next steps, I'm sure ministries will start talking to each other, and then they'll find some common ground to go ahead.
Right. Professor Roy?
Yeah. Yes, I'll quickly drive my 5 points, which I mentioned in the beginning. The first point, without which we cannot move, that foresters, I mean the forest department official, whoever is there, and the tribal, they should appreciate that forest cannot exist without tribal. The forest department should understand it. The tribal department should understand that if there is no sustainable management of the forest, if the tribal do not follow the Biological Diversity Act, if the tribal do not understand the meaning of value addition and marketing, the development will not be there. So realization is then, for that, I have mentioned the cultural change of the department, organizational change. This attitudinal change of both the department. We need to have a reform of the department. I will use the word reform of the department to understand the value of sustainability and tribal together. So that is the first requirement. The second point is that since following the act, we cannot go beyond act. Following the act, Gram Sabha is authority to manage his own and also see the adjoining. It is mentioned the word adjoining of water flow, water regime, biological diversity, and the livelihood. So no single Gram Sabha can manage the forest ignoring the adjacent. So my second suggestion is that keeping the group of Gram Sabha who are interdependent, there has to be either at subdivision level or, as Dr. Saxena has mentioned, at the district level, some authority for periodical monitoring of biological diversity, livelihood, and more importantly, for the sustainability. That was the third point of monitoring. The fourth point, Dr. Saxena will appreciate that a movement of joint forest management, at some places has been very successful, if not all. And as per our study, what I'm saying based on my study, as per our study, whichever is Gram Sabha is very successful in implementation of FRA or Biological Diversity Act, there the relationship with the forest department is also very good. So some of the JFM, not all I say, some of the JFM, where it has been working successfully, it has to be recognized that joint forest management has to be appreciated and should be retained because of their endeavor of conservation. I will tell one important point here. In India, many state governments are getting external funding like World Bank, JICA, and DFID. There, the term is that you have to involve community. In Odisha, Tripura, it is based on the Joint Forest Management Committee. So if you go for FRA, I want to make it clear. If you go for FRA, ignore JFM, those committee will collapse. Because the funding is based on the collaboration of work. The collaboration is very, very important. And the last point, here, the forest fragmentation has to be avoided. Dr. Saxena and will agree, we were talking, as per the FRA, many individuals are given individual forest, individual. We have studied, hardly some of them are utilizing it 100%. It's lying barren. So there has to be monitoring. Those tribal who are given forest land, how they are managing. In Odisha, we get in some places a very good example of convergence of Narega and other livelihood sources for those tribal who got benefit to support a proper use of the land for livelihood. Otherwise, by handing over land, if government thinks we have done our responsibility, the job is half done. The purpose of sustainability, livelihood lost. So, organizational change of forest department, monitoring for sustainability, building capacity of the Gram Sabha, working with the forest department and management, and those who are given land, post grant of FRA, how they are working. Otherwise, the purpose was not handing over land. Purpose was for sustainable management. That has to be monitored. This is what I want to say.
Thank you so much.
You see, I have a doctor appointment now. I think they have answered it well. They're all experts.
Right.
Professor Roy has given a good summation of all the things which are required.
Yeah.
Good, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saxena, Professor Roy, Professor Dhar, and Mr. Chawla. It was really an illuminating discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.